It was a quiet morning at Arlington National Cemetery. The sky was soft gray, and a gentle breeze moved through the tall trees. Everything was peaceful, almost too still, as if the air itself carried the weight of the memories buried in the ground. Visitors spoke in whispers, careful not to disturb the silence that wrapped around the place like a blanket. And standing there, firm and proud, was Sergeant Daniel Brooks, one of the tomb guards who watched over the tomb of the unknown soldier. Daniel had spent years preparing for this duty. It wasn't something a soldier simply signed up for. It was earned with discipline, heart, and perfection. Every tomb guard went through months of training, learning every motion, every rule, and every step until it became a part of them. They guarded not just a monument, but the honor of every soldier who never came home. Every soul whose name was unknown but whose sacrifice was eternal. For Daniel, this post was sacred. Every time he stepped onto that marble path, his heart filled with pride. His movements were sharp, his uniform spotless, and his focus unshakable. He knew that people came from around the world to watch this ceremony, to see the precision, to feel the respect, to remember. The changing of the guard was not just a routine, it was a promise. Rain or shine, day or night, the tomb was never left unguarded. That day, Daniel moved with perfect timing. His boots clicked softly against the stone. Each motion had meaning. 21 steps, pause, turn, 21 seconds, turn again. The number 21 was not random. It was a symbol of the highest military honor, the 21-gun salute. Every movement said, "You are not forgotten." As Daniel turned again, his eyes caught something in the small crowd behind the barrier. Among the visitors stood an elderly woman. She was thin, her shoulders slightly bent from age, but her posture was still proud. She held something close to her chest, a folded American flag. The fabric looked worn as if it had been held many times before. Daniel quickly looked away. Guards were trained to stay focused, never distracted by visitors. But for some reason, the image of the woman stayed with him. There was something about her stillness, the way her lips moved as if whispering to someone who wasn't there. The woman stood quietly, not moving an inch. Her eyes were fixed on the tomb and tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. She didn't make a sound. She didn't draw attention. But Daniel could sense the deep pain in her silence. A few more minutes passed and the wind began to blow harder. It tugged gently at the woman's scarf, lifting it slightly. But she didn't seem to notice. She was lost in her own world, maybe remembering someone she had loved long ago. Visitors came and went, taking pictures, whispering, or just watching. But the woman stayed. The guards changed positions with perfect precision, their movement steady and exact. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about her. As the ceremony continued, the woman began to whisper again, her voice just barely reaching Daniel's ears through the wind. "He was only 19, she said softly. "He promised he'd come home." The words struck Daniel deeply. He didn't know her story, but he could feel the meaning in those few words. It wasn't just grief, it was love, the kind that never faded, even after decades. Daniel kept his posture straight. He was not supposed to react to anything around him. The tomb guard's code was strict. No emotion, no movement unless part of the ceremony. They were symbols of eternal respect, not individuals with feelings on display. But something inside him began to stir. The woman clutched the flag tighter. Her hands trembled, and for a moment she looked like she might fall. The people around her noticed, but no one moved to help, not wanting to disturb the ceremony. Daniel saw it all from the corner of his eye, and his heart started to beat faster. He reminded himself of the rule. The guard never breaks formation. No matter what happens, the tomb always comes first. But in that moment, it didn't feel so simple. This wasn't just a visitor. This was someone who had already given everything. Her husband, her years, her peace. Daniel's training told him to stay still. His heart told him something different. As the woman steadied herself again, Daniel caught sight of her lips moving once more. "I'm here, John," she whispered. "I kept my promise." The name echoed in his mind. John. A soldier, maybe, one who never came back. Daniel didn't know, but the image of the folded flag, her trembling hands and her tear-streaked face filled his thoughts. He wanted to step forward, to say something, to do something, anything, to honor her pain. But he couldn't, not yet. The ceremony demanded silence, discipline, and control. And Daniel had never broken protocol in his entire career. Still, as the wind blew harder and the sky darkened slightly, Daniel felt a pull in his chest. He tried to push it down, but it was stronger than duty. It was compassion, the kind that came from knowing what loss felt like. Daniel had lost a friend years ago, someone who had served beside him and never made it home. Watching this woman brought those memories back in a flood of emotion. He took another step, another turn, another pause. But this time his thoughts were not on his movements. They were on her, the widow who stood alone, holding on to the last piece of someone she loved. As the ceremony neared its end, the crowd began to thin out, but the woman stayed. Daniel knew that in a few moments the guard would be changed again. He would step off, another would take his place. But before that could happen, something unexpected was about to unfold. Something that would touch everyone there and remind them that even in the most disciplined of duties, the heart sometimes finds a way to speak louder than the rules. As the minutes passed, the woman holding the folded flag remained in her spot, her eyes never leaving the tomb of the unknown soldier. Her hands shook slightly and her breathing came in soft, uneven gasps. Daniel continued his steps, his boots clicking on the marble floor, his movements precise and deliberate. Every eye in the small crowd was on him, yet he couldn't take his mind off the widow. It wasn't common for someone to stay for so long without moving. Visitors usually walked past quickly, taking a photo or pausing briefly before leaving. But she stayed completely still, almost as if time itself had stopped around her. Daniel noticed the way her shoulders sagged as fatigue started to set in. Even with her coat, she looked frail, and he worried she might lose her balance. Daniel's training reminded him of the rules. No guard ever broke protocol. They were a symbol of unwavering discipline. No matter the weather, no matter the crowd, no matter the circumstances, they followed the ritual perfectly. But Daniel felt something stirring deep inside him. It wasn't just sympathy or curiosity. It was recognition. He had seen this kind of grief before, raw, quiet, and stubborn. It didn't ask for attention. It didn't seek comfort, but it demanded respect. The wind grew stronger, tugging gently at the woman's scarf and coat. The folds of the flag in her hands fluttered slightly, and for a brief moment Daniel thought it might slip from her grasp. The crowd murmured softly, noticing her struggle, but no one stepped forward. They were strangers, visitors who respected the ceremony but didn't dare intervene. Daniel's heart tightened. Her voice broke the silence, just barely audible over the wind. "I kept your promise, John. I never forgot you." The words were simple, yet Daniel felt the weight behind them. A promise kept for decades, a love that had endured, a heart that had continued to beat even after tragedy had tried to take it away. He paused for a moment, unsure if he was imagining it, unsure if the emotion was too strong. But there it was, undeniable, real, and moving. She shifted her weight, trying to stay steady. Her legs wobbled slightly and she leaned more heavily on the railing in front of her. Daniel's eyes flicked down instinctively. He knew that if she fell, it could be dangerous. No one was close enough to catch her quickly. The thought of it made his heart race. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Every fiber of his training screamed at him, "Remain in formation, follow the rules, never break protocol." But another voice, quieter but insistent, whispered, "Sometimes compassion matters more than rules. Sometimes a single act of kindness speaks louder than 100 rituals." The ceremony continued, the crowd watching, the other guards following their drills. Daniel could feel his heartbeat in his ears. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the woman's grief had somehow transferred onto his shoulders. He reminded himself of the countless soldiers who had given their lives, of the families who had suffered silently. This widow was just one of many, yet in that moment she was all he could see. She spoke again, her words almost a whisper. "I never thought I'd stand here alone. But here I am. For him." Daniel's hands itched to move, to step forward, but he froze. He knew the eyes of the crowd were upon him, waiting, observing every motion. If he broke formation, they would notice immediately. Yet something inside him refused to stay silent. Then came a small shift. The widow's hands tightened around the flag and she straightened as best she could. Her eyes were fixed on the tomb, but she looked weaker than before. Daniel realized she might not be able to stay standing for much longer. A sudden surge of protectiveness overcame him, a feeling he had never experienced so strongly in his entire career. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to remain calm. Each step, each turn, each pause he had practiced countless times now felt like a test, not of skill but of conscience. Daniel knew that one wrong move could be seen as a breach of duty, but doing nothing felt like failing her in a way that no rule could ever justify. The woman shifted again, and Daniel saw her struggle to maintain her balance. Her eyes scanned the area briefly, perhaps searching for help, but the crowd remained hesitant, unsure, respectful yet distant. Daniel's decision crystallized in that instant. He would act, and he would do so with respect and honor, not recklessness. As he turned to approach her, a hush fell over the small group of spectators. They could sense that something extraordinary was about to happen, though none of them knew exactly what. Daniel's boots echoed softly on the marble as he broke the usual rhythm of the steps. Every second felt stretched, elongated, as if the world itself had slowed down to witness this moment. When he reached the widow, Daniel stopped a respectful distance away. He did not speak. He did not gesture unnecessarily. Instead, he simply gave her a crisp, formal salute. It was the same salute he would have given to any commanding officer, but now it was directed at her, a gesture of honor, respect, and recognition. The woman's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. For a brief moment, she could not speak. Then tears streamed freely down her face and she whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing him, for seeing me." Daniel held the salute for a few heartbeats longer, feeling the connection between past and present, grief and compassion, duty and humanity. Then he slowly returned to his post, resuming the ceremonial steps as if nothing had happened. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like a small deviation, but those who had witnessed it knew it was far more profound than any routine drill. The crowd was silent, moved beyond words. Whispers spread like gentle waves. Did he just? I can't believe he did that. What a brave act of kindness. Some took quiet pictures, careful not to intrude. Others simply stared, their hearts full, their emotions raw. The widow remained at the barrier for a few more moments, clutching the flag, shaking slightly but smiling through her tears. She had felt seen, acknowledged, and honored in a way she never thought possible. Daniel's simple act had lifted the weight of decades of grief from her shoulders, even if only for a fleeting moment. As Daniel continued his steps, his heart calmed. He felt the warmth of doing the right thing, the quiet satisfaction that sometimes true honor required not just discipline, but compassion. He knew he had broken the rules, yet he also knew he had upheld the greater purpose of the tomb guard, to honor those who had given everything, and to respect the families who carried their memories. And in that quiet afternoon, with the wind gently brushing through the cemetery, something remarkable had happened. A soldier had followed his heart, a widow had felt remembered, and the spectators had witnessed a reminder that even the strictest rules can bend when guided by humanity, love, and empathy. After that quiet moment, the widow remained at the barrier for a little while longer, holding her folded flag close to her heart. Her eyes were wet with tears, but there was a new light in them, a sense of comfort, a feeling that someone had finally seen her grief and honored it. She whispered her husband's name softly, a sound barely carried by the wind, yet it seemed to fill the space around the tomb with something sacred. Daniel returned to his post, moving with perfect precision once again. To anyone watching without context, he appeared like any other soldier, disciplined, formal, and unyielding. But those who had witnessed the brief salute knew the truth. They had seen an extraordinary act, something that went beyond the rules, beyond ceremony, and straight into the heart. Word of the incident began to spread quietly at first. Other soldiers on duty heard whispers from the crowd, their eyes reflecting amazement and respect. "Did you see that?" one guard asked softly. He actually saluted her. He broke protocol. There was a moment of tension among some. Breaking protocol was no small matter. It was a breach of the code that every tomb guard lived by. But as more details emerged and the story reached higher ranks, the response was unexpectedly warm. Daniel's commanding officer reviewed the event carefully. The official report acknowledged the strict rules, but there was also an understanding. Sometimes the human heart must guide the action, and respect can take many forms. In the end, the officer simply said, "He did the right thing." That salute carried more honor than any routine motion. Meanwhile, the widow slowly turned to leave, walking with careful steps. She paused one last time at the barrier, looking back at the tomb, then at Daniel, who continued his guard with unwavering discipline. A small, grateful smile formed on her lips. She would remember this moment forever. The day someone truly saw her pain and without words acknowledged her love and sacrifice. The story did not stay quiet for long. Other visitors who had witnessed the event shared it with friends and family. Soon it spread beyond the cemetery, reaching people across the country through social media and news stories. Everyone who read about it felt moved, inspired, and deeply touched. The narrative of strict discipline meeting heartfelt compassion reminded people that honor is not only about following rules, but also about understanding the feelings of others and acting with empathy. For Daniel, the days after were quiet yet reflective. He continued his duties, each step measured and precise. But inside, he carried a sense of fulfillment. He had served his country, honored the fallen, and comforted someone in a profound human way. That single act had created a bridge between duty and compassion, between ceremony and the heart. The impact of his actions was felt by many. Soldiers spoke about it in quiet conversations, sharing the story with new recruits as an example of courage and humanity. Civilians who heard the story were moved to think about the sacrifices made by families of soldiers. Not only the soldiers themselves, but the loved ones who waited, worried, and remembered. Months later, the widow wrote a letter to the cemetery, addressed to Sergeant Daniel Brooks. She explained how much that small gesture had meant to her, how it had brought peace to a heart that had been heavy with loss for decades. She thanked him for honoring not only her husband, but also her own dedication to his memory. The letter was simple, sincere, and deeply emotional. It expressed gratitude for an act that many would have overlooked, but she had felt with her entire being. Daniel read the letter quietly in his quarters, feeling a warmth he had never anticipated. It reminded him why he had chosen this path: to serve, to protect, and to honor those who sacrificed everything. He had followed his training, yet he had also listened to his heart. The experience reinforced a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. True honor is not measured only by rules, ceremonies, or precision. It is measured by compassion, empathy, and understanding. The story became part of the legacy of Arlington National Cemetery. Guides shared it with visitors, explaining that the tomb guards were human beings first, carrying their own hearts and histories even as they fulfilled a sacred duty. Families visiting the cemetery were inspired by the story, realizing that grief and love were universal, and that small acts of recognition could carry tremendous meaning. Years later, Daniel would reflect on that day many times. He remembered the feel of the marble under his boots, the sound of the wind through the trees, and the sight of the elderly widow holding her flag. He remembered the moment he saluted her, and the look of gratitude in her eyes. It was a memory etched not just in his mind but in his heart. The widow herself carried that moment for the rest of her life. Whenever she visited the cemetery afterward, she remembered the young soldier who had broken protocol to honor her and her husband. She told friends and family about it, sharing the story as a symbol of hope, kindness, and respect. It became a story she cherished, proof that even in places governed by strict rules and routines, humanity could shine through. In the end, the act of one man changed the experience of many. For a widow, it brought comfort and acknowledgement that she had longed for. For soldiers, it reminded them of the delicate balance between duty and compassion. For the public, it showed that true respect is not only about strict adherence to rules, but also about recognizing the human emotions that underlie every sacrifice. That afternoon at Arlington National Cemetery became more than just a ceremony. It became a story of empathy and courage, a story that reminded everyone that honor is strongest when combined with kindness. Sergeant Daniel Brooks' simple salute, a brief gesture of respect, echoed far beyond the marble walls and the polished boots. It became a lesson for generation that rules serve a purpose, but the heart gives them meaning. And so, the tomb of the unknown soldier continued to stand, watched over by guards who knew their duty, and by visitors who came to remember. Yet hidden within its history was a moment that no protocol could define. A moment when a soldier, guided by compassion, gave a grieving widow a gift far greater than words, far greater than ceremony, the gift of being truly seen, truly honored, and truly remembered.